So what insight was sparked by the dialogue?
Sure.
You want to start that again?
Right.
No, it's just, okay, so you just want me to go ahead and ask it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what insight was sparked by the dialogue for you today? Or said another way, when did the penny drop? Or what was the main aha moment for you?
Well, on the first part of the question, I continue to be struck by the great gulf between the foreign policy community and the domestic health community, and how the dialogue is really only just beginning. And even when it does get going, the emphasis seems to be on how the Canadian government and stakeholders can do things abroad for the good of the world, with less attention to the reciprocal relationship about how we can mobilize foreign policy, in this case Canadian foreign policy and global governance, to equally contribute to promoting the health of Canadians at home, which was the central question of this mandate. One practical expression of that, the aha moment, was when we heard from our colleague for Foreign Affairs about how the Canadian government reacted to the international initiative to declare that every person on the planet had a right to clean water. The reaction on the part of Canada was somewhat wary, somewhat defensive. Would this require us to do things we didn't want to do? Might it be expensive? But nonetheless, Canada went along. It indicates the degrees of freedom one might have. But at the same time, I think it highlighted, to me at least, the problem of framing the discourse on global health, Canadians' health, in terms of rights. Because, of course, it's fairly easy to give every person on the planet the right to this, that, and the other thing. It really does beg the question, then, who has the responsibility to deliver those rights? And I think in Canadian foreign policy over the past several years, we've had much more success with the responsibilities agenda on a global scale and discourse than we have had with rights. And I think that's going to be particularly true when we have a conversation amongst all Canadians and say, okay, how do we best promote the responsibility for your health? Because I think all Canadians share that responsibility. And that's very different than have each individual say, I've got a right, give me more.
So what actions do you think need to be taken now to address the challenge? Who needs to do what?
Well, we certainly have, I think all political scientists and many Canadians agree, the unprecedented moment, first time in several decades, of a majority government with a known prime minister and a known approach there for 4 or 5 years, with the death for at least a few years of the separatist threat from Quebec. That's an enormous window of opportunity to think beyond the short term art of the possible, to think strategically, to think long term, and to think innovatively. So I think it's very important to have the next stage of a dialogue like this fairly quickly begin to get those innovative ideas into the thinking of Canada's new majority government very quickly at the critical point when they begin to think about their strategy for the next 5 years. But at the same time, to fully involve in that Francophone Canadians from the province of Quebec, who we really didn't hear from today. And of course, there's much that's very new and not well understood in the rest of Canada going on in the province of Quebec. So in that sense, it really does need to be a fully national dialogue. And then one could add representatives from the First Nations community, other stakeholders, to the faith-based communities, very important for great Canadian global health initiatives over the past year or two. They have a stake, much to contribute. So much to do quickly as a follow-up to this important initiative to build on the momentum it's generated.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Good.
Those were very thorough.